I played Mario Kart Super Circuit many years ago, and going into this review, my memory was a bit fuzzy. All I could remember was that I really liked it, and I decided to replay it again and rediscover what it was about the game that was so addictive all those years ago. This review assumes that you've played a Mario Kart game before, which I'm pretty sure that most of our audience has. I'm going to be covering things that make Super Circuit different from the other Mario Kart games, but I'm not going to bore you with explaining basic stuff like the difference between a red shell and a green shell. What's going to happen when you first play this game is that you're going to take your very first turn and realize that it's a very different Mario Kart game than the others. Super Circuit is the only game in the series that comes close to the feel of the original SNES Mario Kart, but it ultimately plays differently than any other Mario Kart game. It'll be weird at first, but I'd like to encourage you to stick with it and keep playing even though you're going to be flying off-road and swerving around a lot at first. I promise you'll get used to it after some time playing. The controls aren't bad, they're just very different from other Mario Karts. Most times, when I pick up a new Mario Kart game, I set it to the highest class available because I want a challenge, but that didn't end up being a good idea for Super Circuit. A slightly lower difficulty than what you're used to will help you get used to the game's unusual feel. I strongly recommend that absolute beginners start at 50cc, and I think veterans should have a comfortable experience on 100cc. This game is different from other Mario Kart games, and you're going to have to get used to how the turning works, so saving 150cc for later is the best way to do it. As with all Mario Kart games, there's various racers to choose from with different attributes. There's light and heavy racers, and as usual, the light racers handle better and have a higher acceleration, while heavy racers have worse handling with higher top speeds and more weight to bully other riders on the track. I played with all the different racers, and I didn't really come out with a particular favorite, nor did I come to the conclusion that any racers are bad picks. Super Circuit's items should be familiar to anybody who's played a Mario Kart game, but there's a couple quirks and differences that I'll mention. Both green and red shells are harder to aim in this installment. Red shells in most other Mario Karts tend to be a bit too good at perfectly navigating the road ahead and almost always reaching their target. I prefer this style where red shells are dumb enough themselves to force the player to put some thought into when they want to fire them. Red shells in Super Circuit are really bad at getting through hairpin turns without bonking onto the wall, and I think that's the way it should be. The Power Star is the most useful item in this installment, and it appears quite often. Clever star use will allow you to improvise your own shortcuts through off-road segments and hazards to get some massive gains in the race. My most exciting moments in this game involved this item, and I think I enjoy the star in this game more than any other Mario Kart game. The game has the blue shell which seeks out the person in first place, but it appears extremely rarely. I played a lot of this game, and I'm fairly certain I only saw it once. I found this game to be pretty challenging by Mario Kart standards. The game isn't super difficult on a consistent basis, but there are quite a few tracks on 150cc that I honestly felt reached levels of difficulty you get from your average F-Zero game. I've always wanted Mario Kart games to be a little bit harder, so being quite challenged by this game in many areas made me enjoy playing it a lot. Super Circuit has one of the most vicious rainbow road tracks in the series, so make sure you take a deep breath before the race starts, or you might find yourself hurling your Game Boy Advance at the wall. That all being said about the level of difficulty, I really appreciate how the game's balanced in such a way that you can recover from even the most devastating mistakes. Don't give up on a race if you drop to 8th place. You can definitely make it to 1st if you try hard enough. I'll go over the advanced techniques in this game so you guys have a smoother experience if you decide to play this. The Rocket Boost, which is the move in every Mario Kart game where you launch yourself at the start of the race, has a fairly precise timing in Super Circuit. If you follow this method, you should be able to get it every time. The Rocket Boost is achieved by holding A during the exact midpoint between the second and third starting lights. An easy way to measure this in your head is just pretend like it's a musical beat. Like this. Start holding A on 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, go! I'll show you one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, go! Practice it in time trial mode. It won't take long to master. Mini Turbo in Mario Kart games is where you get a boost by meeting a specific requirement while drifting through a turn. Super Circuit has a mini turbo system similar to the one used in the SNES Mario Kart. Here's how it works. Hold R before turning to start drifting, then hold the D-pad in the direction of the turn. Keep holding R in that direction. If you drift for more than 1 second, then straighten your kart out, you'll get a speed boost. You'll know you did it right when you see the blue flames that come out the back of your kart. Because of the 1 second requirement and the fact that the kart needs to be able to completely straighten out in order to activate the boost, not all turns are suitable candidates for Mini Turbo. This is usually going to be something you do on hairpin turns, and it'll be a lot tougher to pull off on anything less sharp than that. You'll lose the Mini Turbo charge if you drive off-road or hit anything before you activate it, so it can be tough to do correctly. Thankfully, this game isn't balanced entirely around this mechanic, and you can beat the game without it. Mini Turbos are a lot easier to pull off in most other Mario Kart games, and they actually indicate when your Mini Turbo is fully charged and ready to use. But I do like how you have to pick and choose the right times to do it in this game, instead of doing it on almost every single turn. This game has all 20 racetracks from Super Mario Kart on SNES, which really makes it easy for me to give this game a glowing review. However, there is a bit of a snag involved to unlocking these hidden tracks. There seems to be a lot of confusion online as to the exact method of unlocking the SNES tracks, which I find really strange for a game that's nearly 2 decades old. Lots of sources are reporting the method correctly, but a lot of other sources are reporting incorrect methods. I went through multiple save files and tried all the various methods reported so I could rule out the bogus ones. Turns out there's only one way to do it. So here's how you unlock them. Place first overall to get a gold trophy in all 5 Super Circuit tracks for a specific engine class. So basically, like, if you want the SNES tracks in 50cc, get the gold medal on the 50cc version of Mushroom, Flower, Lightning, Star, and Special Cups. Once that's done, you have to replay each cup in that engine class, except you have to finish the cup with a total of 100 or more coins collected during the circuit. You don't have to place, you just have to complete the cup. Note that you can't progress to the next race if you place 5th or higher, so there is still a bit of a challenge involved to this. Each cup has a respective SNES cup associated with it, so you'll be unlocking them one at a time. And that's the actual method. I checked and double-checked myself to make sure. The coin collecting portion is a fun and alternate way to play, because there's a different strategy required to pull it off successfully. Bumping into other racers, taking damage from items, and running into course hazards will make you lose coins, so you have to be careful, all the while making sure you get at least 4th place in every race. It's a very different experience than racing normally, and I had a lot of fun doing it. So how are the SNES tracks once you get them? They're really fun. It's important to note that because Mario Super Circuit has very different mechanics, these tracks aren't going to feel the same as they did in the original. I think this is a good thing because you can just go back and play Super Mario Kart again. There's a lot of interesting gameplay that comes out of bringing these old tracks into this new game, and they give you a much different experience than the Super Circuit tracks or playing the SNES game. They're a lot smaller and simpler in comparison to Super Circuit's normal tracks, and they're 5-lap races instead of 3. The play conditions are more cramped, so riders are more squashed together, and it's easier to lap the riders in last place. There's a lot more karts bumping together, items flying around, and increased mayhem that makes these tracks an absolute joy to experience. A lot of the road hazards got cut out in this version, but I'm okay with that. I think it was because they didn't have the available memory to redraw the sprites, such as Monty Mole in Donut Plains, but don't quote me on that because it's just a guess. This is for sure one of the most worth it unlockables in any racing game that I've played, especially since I'm such a huge fan of the original SNES game. This game has 40 racetracks on it. The only Mario Kart game with more than that is Mario Kart 8. A lot of Mario Kart games seem to be over too quick, but I definitely felt satisfied after getting through everything there is to get through in this one. I hope Nintendo puts a ton of tracks in Mario Kart 9, because it's definitely something that makes these games better, even if a lot of those additional tracks are relatively simple. Not every Mario Kart track needs to be convoluted or graphically intensive. Cozy, uncomplicated racetracks that aren't littered with hazards and gimmicks are just as fun. I mean, Super Mario Kart on the SNES is mostly tracks like that, and that's one of the best racing games ever made. I can't really give a definitive verdict on the graphics. I wouldn't be surprised if younger players who were raised on more advanced graphics might view this game as a garbled mess of pixels. It's definitely not the game's fault though. This is about as graphically polished as a Mario Kart could have possibly been on the Game Boy Advance hardware. This game does demonstrate something I feel is important for graphical design, which is how color can greatly enhance a game's visual appeal. I think if you're making a game and for some reason you're limited on the kind of graphics that you can do, a big way to compensate is make appealing color choices. The original Game Boy Advance hardware didn't have a backlight, and you had to make sure there was a decently bright light source pointing at the screen in order to play. Even in ideal situations, games still had to use deliberate color choices to make the games easier to read visually. Several titles that came out early in the Game Boy Advance's life had dark color palettes that caused a lot of eye strain for players, so later GBA titles tended to use more saturated color palettes with a wide selection of hues, and made sure objects were clearly distinct from the background. You can see a good example of this in the track Cheeseland, which has very saturated yellows, oranges, and blues. Nowadays, playing a Game Boy Advance game with a backlight is simple, and in retrospect, the requirement for more colorful games resulted in a library of games that are very nice to look at. Super Circuit demonstrates this very well, and is more visually interesting in terms of color than the other two games that preceded it, Super Mario Kart and Mario Kart 64. I feel like this set the Mario Kart series on a path of exceptional color design, and it culminates in Mario Kart 8, which is definitely one of the best games in terms of color that I've ever seen. To sum up my point, if you're making a game and for whatever reason you don't have access to detailed graphics, I suggest putting work into your color choices, because even simple graphics can look beautiful if the colors are beautiful. Mario Kart is a very solid franchise with every last installment, so Super Circuit is up against some very stiff competition. I want to wait until I've properly reviewed all the Mario Kart games before I start comparing and ranking them, but I feel like Super Circuit is very worth playing. I got a lot out of it because I found the game adequately challenging, and I love playing through the large amount of tracks. I'm really glad that I played this game again. It's very possible that you'll be unable to tolerate the controls or the graphics, and I respect that if you feel that way. In my opinion, this was the best Mario Kart game that could have possibly been made for the Game Boy Advance, and it holds up very well.